Hello, hello, I'm Samaya, and on this channel we binge films, TV shows, and books, and yap about them. In this series, we will be covering and analyzing every single Best Picture in Oscar history and doing what apparently the voters weren't doing. We will be watching every single movie nominated in the Best Picture category in Oscar history and deciding, did the winner really deserve that winner spot? Today, we'll be covering the 1931 winner, All Quiet on the Western Front. Just as a reminder, there are no strict voting rules for actual voting members, so I created my own for the series. Y'all, my hair is just doing whatever it wants today. I apologize for the frizz, whatever's going on. I'll be using this rubric and rating the movie based on each of the category rated 1 to 5. I'll then add up this number and divide it by 5 in order to get a general 5-star rating. And if I feel that the number is too generous or not generous enough, I will either raise the rating or lower it. Because ultimately, we rate movies based on the emotional impact, and the emotional baseline can be different for each person. If you just want to hear about the winner, please go ahead and fast forward to this timestamp. The Big House. The Big House was released in 1930, starring Daddy... Sorry guys, I had a tickle there. Chester Morris as Morgan, Wallace Beery as Butch, and Robert Montgomery as Kent Marlowe. It was directed by George Hill and released by Cosmopolitan. The Big House is a crime and drama film about a young man who committed accidental manslaughter and is sent to the prison where he meets other prominent prison figures who are planning an escape from the brutal conditions. For the literary element, I decided to rate it a 4. For the directing element, a 4. For the visual element, a 4. For the editing element, a 4. For the sound element, a 4. The final rating that I gave this movie was a 4-star. I actually really enjoyed this movie. This one was quite a ride. I would say this movie is Shamshock Redemption meets Of Mice and Men. Hear me out, hear me out. This movie came before both that film and that book, so hey, it might have been the inspiration for both, who knows. The main character Morgan reminded me a lot of George in the way that they're both like intelligent. They also could control the emotions of their friend and kind of keep them in check, but reminded me of so much of Lenny. Oh my god, the black and white thinking and doing things based off of how he feels in the moment. Very impulsive, because he literally plans a prison break that does not make sense or work in any capacity. I would say my biggest critique is once again the female character. Kent, he had a really hot sister that Morgan had his eyes on when he saw her visit during one of the visiting hours. And so when he escaped from prison, he went to her store and was like, hey girl, I need this and this. What do you recommend? But she remembered him, so she was like, oh, he's here to kill me. Because, long story short, Kent and Morgan had some beef with each other in prison that he warned his sister about. You know, at first, she outsmarted him. She was like, oh, I don't think we have that in the store, what you're looking for, but we might have in the back. Just give me a moment. Let me go check. Morgan follows her in the back and is like, oh, do you need help? Like, are there heavy boxes? She was like, sure. Pick up that box in the corner. And then she grabbed a gun and had him at gunpoint. I loved it. I was like, oh yes, like girl, shoot him if you need to. No, she did not. Instead, she looked at him for like maybe 5 seconds, put the gun down, and confessed that she knew who he was. She knew about the beef with her brother. She was like, why are you here? Blah, blah, blah. She even tried to call the police, by the way, when she had him at gunpoint, but she hung up. Girl, what? Morgan thought it was safe enough to approach her. Not only approach her, but ask her for the gun back. And she gave it to him.
Wait a minute.
Babes, Where's the self-preservation? Do you have any? The dialogue was genius. There's a specific line of dialogue that I'm talking about here. It's attached to Butch's character. Him and Morgan would have this line exchange together where if Butch does something wrong or he gets offended by what Morgan does, one of them is like, yeah, and the other's like, yeah. And then Butch always says, who, me? And then the other one's like, yeah. It's just so funny because of the repetition. It's literally exchange and dialogue that's only done between Butch and someone else. I think that's a really interesting way to give insight to the character in terms of how he is not affected by the world, but instead he bends the world to his logic, and also that he's so simplistic in his thinking. Because right after the who, me? Yeah, if he was angry at the beginning of that or sad at the beginning of that, he always ends that exchange happy or satisfied that everything seems okay again. Like I said, very Lenny of him, very black and white. Would I recommend this movie? Yes. Disraeli. Disraeli was released in 1929, starring George Arliss as Disraeli, Joanne Bennett as Lady Clarissa, Florence Arliss as Lady Mary, Anthony Bushell as Charles, and Doris Lloyd as Mrs. Travellers. It was directed by Alfred E. Green and released by Warner Bros. Disraeli is a history and drama film about the Prime Minister of Great Britain during the late 1800s and the sneaky drama surrounding his pursuit to purchase the Suez Canal. For the literary element, I decided to rate it a 5. For the directing element, a 3. For the visual element, a 3. For the editing element, a 4. And for the sound element, a 3. For the final rating, I gave it a 3.6 technically, but personally, I would rate it a 2.5. My main issue with this one and with another one we're going to talk about is the sound just had a ton of static. And yes, I know. This is the early stages of sound. I know. I get it. But compared to the competition, they had their sound together, except for one other one, which we will talk about heavily. I learned a lot from this movie. I don't know much history, but it was a colonizer story. I just couldn't root for the main character, Disraeli. I just couldn't get over how he wanted to basically gift a whole country that is already occupied by people to the queen. I don't know, it just left a distaste in my mouth. But obviously that's history, so I also couldn't really get into the story because it was just about this man's ego and his power trope and how he could quote unquote outsmart everybody. Once again, it just like leaves a little distaste in my mouth. Maybe it's just a me thing where I get really turned off by people who think they're above others. There's a difference between being confident and just straight up full of yourself. That's just my personal take. The love stories were pretty interesting to watch. I really liked Clarissa. I was like, yes, I love a queen who can clutch their 10 toes in the sand and stand on business and knows what she wants in a man. She was basically the love interest. I don't think she was related to Disraeli, but she spent a lot of time with him, and he kind of treated her like a granddaughter. So I guess they had that kind of relationship. She was interested in this one stiff guy. He grew up rich, and she just didn't like how he never worked for anything or had the ambition to work. She straight up rejected his proposal and was like, no, I want a man who works, who actually gets gritty with it. And that guy changed. By the end of the movie, he went on a dangerous mission. He worked for his place in society, and boom, they were married. I was like, yes, girl. She knew what she wanted. Would I recommend this movie? I'm sorry, no, I just wouldn't. The Divorcee. The Divorcee was released in 1930, starring Norma Shearer as Jerry, Robert Montgomery as Don, and Daddy... Sorry, it happened again. Chester Morris as Ted. It was directed by Robert C. Leonard and released by MGM. The Divorcee is a romance and drama film about a couple who marries too fast, ending with one of them cheating on the other and having to choose between their newfound lover and the one they committed to. For the literary element, I gave this movie a 3. For the directing element, a 3. For the visual element, a 3. For the editing element, a 3. And for the sound element, a 2. So my final rating was a 2.8, but let's give it 2 stars. Guys, the sound was so bad for this one. I kept having to guess what was going on. Oh my god. I also thought the man Don cheating on his wife with her friend Jerry was crazy, especially after he caused a car accident that mutilated his wife's face. The audacity was, it blew my mind. And then also Ted, the ex-husband of Jerry, they had some time apart and she came back, apologized, and he was like, okay, yeah, I accept your apology. Let's get back together. I was like, oh, what a letdown. I expected more of a fight between the two. I expected, I don't know, to feel something more than that. And you know what's crazy? Dawn was his best friend. So it's not like she cheated on him with a random man. She cheated on him with his best friend. And all she had to do was apologize. And he took her back. Cheating propaganda. And you know what's even crazier? Jerry was gonna go through with getting with Dawn fully, committing to him, despite him still being married to his mutilated wife. The only reason why she changed her mind was because the mutilated wife showed up to her doorstep to beg her not to take her man. I was shocked, to say the least. Would I recommend this movie? No. The Love Parade. The Love Parade was released in 1929, starring Janet MacDonald as Queen Louise and Marie Chevalier as Alfred. It was directed by Ernst Lubitsch and released by Paramount. The Love Parade is a romance and comedy film about a baddie queen in search of a husband. She comes across a French soldier and makes him her husband. Only can his ego survive simply being the prince consort and not a king? For the literary element, I rated this movie a 4. For the directing element, a 5. For the visual element, a 5. For the editing element, a 5. For the sound element, a 5. My final rating was a 3.8 technically, but let's give it a 2 star because of the ending. Guys, when I say I had such high hopes for this movie, I really liked this movie so much. It was so refreshing. I thought it was like a woman empowerment film where, you know, we were following a baddie queen who was having like love issues, but she was taking that into her own hands and not letting men decide her love interest for her. I thought it was just so interesting, and her mindset and her strong personality and also her confidence in her looks. I was like, oh, chef's kiss, chef's kiss. Who wrote this? Who did this? I love this. Until the ending was so triggering to watch as a woman. We just basically watch her husband break her, literally break her. Ruins everything that she is, ruins her confidence, ruins her excitement about this newfound love, all because she had the power in the relationship, because she was literally queen. And also that's just who she was as a person. How disappointing, seriously. But hey, it's the 1920s. What can I expect? But we were almost there. We were so close to something profound. Would I recommend this movie? Yes, because I do think it's still worth watching. But like I said, you'll be severely disappointed by the ending. Now it's time to talk about All Quiet on the Western Front. I just want to give you guys a warning in case you're not aware. This is a very heavy movie. So if you're not in the best mindset to watch this summary and hear my review, that's okay. Click out this video and I'll see you in the next one. But I just wanted to go ahead and give you guys a warning that this is a really heavy one. All Quiet on the Western Front is a war and drama film released in 1930, starring Lew Ayres as Paul and Louise Wolheim as Kat. It was directed by Lewis Milestone and released by Universal. This was Lewis Milestone's first talkie, and he actually made a silent version of this film for the theaters that didn't have sound available yet, and also so it can premiere in other countries where they don't speak English. This film is considered to be the anti-war movie, especially with how realistic it is in showing the brutality of a life in the trenches and how much senseless slaughter there was during the war. Because of this, the film was banned in several countries, including Germany, which Not shocking. Austria, France, and Italy, due to its pacifist nature. And if you don't know what pacifist means, it just means someone who is anti-war or someone who believes that war and violence is wrong. The film was based on a novel written by Eric Maria Remarque, who published it in 1929. Yes, 1929. You heard that correctly. This movie came out in 1930. The movie was already in production in November of 1929, the same year the novel was published, only a couple months after that actually, because Hollywood knew it would be a hit, so they were like, oh, let's go ahead and get this rolling. Let's make this into a film. So, they can do things fast. I'm looking at you, House of Dragon Season 3. Let's go ahead and get into the summary. So the movie opens with the title card stating, the story is neither an accusation nor a confession, and least of all an adventure. For death is not an adventure to those who stand face to face with it. It will try simply to tell a generation of men who, even though they may have escaped as shells, were destroyed by the war. It's 1914 Germany, and a grade school teacher is speaking to a class of young, impressionable men, while a military parade is prancing through the streets beyond the open windows behind him. This teacher gives a powerful speech about the honor to serve one's country and what the nation must do in order to win the war. And this is not the first time he has given the speech, but it is the first time the speech works and wins over the class, mainly because Paul, the boys' social leader, says that he'll enlist in the war, causing a streak of "I'll join too's" to be shouted from each boy in the class. The boys are overjoyed that they no longer have class now that they've joined the military. They treat it almost like an easygoing field trip. That is until their superior officer and drill sergeant Himmelsdas, once their postman, breaks their attitudes with vigorous training, making them fall to the ground, face in the wet mud, every chance he gets. After he deems them worthy, the boys undergo an inspection in front of their superiors. They do well, and so they're told they'll be sent to the front the following day. The boys are passing through a transportation town when suddenly they hear the cut of air followed by an explosion from an air missile. They hit the ground, and when it appears safe, they head to safety, only that one of the boys, Bane, is frozen on the ground, staring at the corpse of one of his friends. Paul rushes forward, urging Bane to snap out of his shock so they can head to safety. The boys continue to travel to the front after this attack, and soon they stop at a lodge full of other soldiers within their company. The boys are absolutely starving, and so Paul asks the other soldiers if they have food to spare. The soldiers laugh and claim they're lucky if they'll get food at all for the next few days, saying that it's normal to go hungry for a while at the front. The boys listen in agony, but their wishes are answered a moment later when one of the company's veteran members, Cat, has stolen a dead pig to feed everyone. With this action alone and Cat's firm attitude, the boys start to deeply respect him and look at him as their leader. Before they can finish their meal, another soldier comes with a mission for the group, late night wiring duty under Cat's command. The boys are nervous but trust Cat's guidance due to their full stomachs. The group makes their way to the wiring site during the dead of night, and Cat teaches the boys how to complete the task. Everything goes smoothly at first. That is until the airstrikes and gunfire begin in the distance, but close enough to cause alarm. The group hit the ground, trying to protect themselves from what could become gunfire their way, and soon enough, the airstrikes begin to hit the dirt around them. They scurry to the trenches, seeking safety, but a few are hit, and one in particular is Bane. The smoke from the bomb blinds Bane, and he runs around screaming, desperately clawing at his eyes. Another bomb strikes, and his body goes limp, falling to the ground. Paul runs to retrieve his friend, and when he returns to the trenches, they find Bane to be dead. He was struck by the shrapnel from the bomb and died instantly. After Bane's death, the group go back and forth from hiding within an underground bunker where they wait out the bombs that never stop and participating in attacks where even more of the soldiers are killed or killing. Most of the boys begin to go mad by the continual bombs, killing the swarms of rats that invade their space and killing others. During their time in the underground bunker, the bombs become so intense that the dirt ceiling begins to collapse, causing one of the boys, Kemerick, to reach hysteria. He flees from the bunker, climbing above the trenches, and immediately collapses over when he is shot in the leg. He later loses his leg and passes away with Paul at his side. Later on, during another attack at the front, Paul and the company rush forward, and Paul ends up falling alone in a ditch where he hides to steady his nerves. As he's in the ditch, the tides of the attack turn, and the enemies, the French, gain the upper hand. The French soldiers leap over the ditch one by one, chasing Paul's company back in the direction they came from, and Paul watches in horror as one soldier notices him hiding in the ditch. The soldier leaps down and tries to kill Paul, but Paul overpowers him, stabbing the enemy soldier fatally. The soldier collapses on his back next to Paul, barely breathing. Paul lifts his helmet above the ditch to see if he could escape with his life, but when he brings the helmet back down, it has a bullet hole shot clean through it. Knowing that if he tries to escape the ditch, he'll be shot, Paul stays in the ditch a night and a day, with the enemy soldier he stabbed dying by his side. He's overwhelmed with guilt and tries to heal the soldier, especially after finding the soldier's wallet was full of details, such as his name and picture of his wife and children, which made him more human in Paul's eyes. Paul pleads with his God to save the soldier he has injured, but the soldier ends up dying anyway, with a weary smile on his face, eyes open and glazed over. Once the enemy stops their attack, Paul escapes the ditch without hesitation, eager to leave the manifestation of what he has become behind in the ditch to rot. He's hospitalized and almost loses his life, but bounces back and is sent on leave. Now that Paul has returned home, it's obvious he's a different man after being on the front for years, but it's also obvious that his town is pretty much the same, but in a way different now that he's seeing it through the eyes as a veteran. He returns to his house where his sister warmly greets him, but warns him of their now sick mother. At a bar, he shares a meal with rich men who debate on war strategy, and it's obvious these men have not been at the front or care to take into account the horrors of war. Paul leaves them with a sick feeling in his stomach, frustrated by how they're treating the war like a game. He goes to visit his grade school teacher, where the same one is spewing the same speech once more to a new set of youthful boys. The teacher spots Paul and is overwhelmed with cunning joy and asks for him to give advice to the boys and feed the war hero narrative. But Paul does the opposite and harshly tells the boys the cold truth about the war. The boys and the teacher call him a coward and make him leave. After the confrontation, Paul comes to the conclusion that there's nothing for him at home anymore. He feels as though the home that once felt like a fitting puzzle has become jarring, and he's the one out of place. The only place that makes him feel like he makes sense is back at the front. And so Paul returns to the war, where a new company of young boys have taken the place of his dead friends. He seeks out Kat, his closest meaning of what home is. He's told Kat is 2 miles from the camp, searching for food in the fields. Paul immediately goes to him, and the pair are reunited. Only their reunion is interrupted by a plane dropping bombs on them. The bombs miss the pair, but the shrapnel hits Kat in the shin, breaking it in one strike. Paul lifts Kat onto his back and makes his way back to camp, yapping away about his thoughts about his visit. He doesn't realize that Kat has gone limp and doesn't respond. So when Paul sets Kat down at the medical tent, the medics confirm Kat to be dead. He was hit in the head by the shrapnel from another bomb as they were walking away. Paul numbly leaves Kat's side, accepting that his one person he was able to call home, that was alive only moments ago, is now dead. Paul is sent out to the front once more, where he is aiming a rifle through a small opening from the trench. His focus is broken by a beautiful butterfly sitting on a rock a few inches away. He reaches for the butterfly, unaware that an enemy soldier has a gun up to his eye, ready to shoot. Just when his hand is about to reach the butterfly, it goes limp after the ring of a gunshot. Paul has been shot by an enemy soldier and lays dead across the trench. The movie ends with an overlay shot of Paul and all the original young boys walking towards an image of mass graves. Oh, sorry guys, just reciting that story, like I get teary-eyed. Like, it really had me depressed. I was going through it. I had to eat my favorite food. I had to scroll on hopecore TikTok. I was just very depressed. So for the literary element, I gave it a 5. I was reading a couple articles about this film, and a lot of people think the ending is pretty cliche and like a knock on the head about everything, but I feel like it was the perfect level of symbolism. So Paul reaching for the butterfly could have a multitude of meanings. The obvious one is that butterflies represent like new beginnings, change, joy, hope, and freedom. In a way, that was Paul reaching for those things, even though he was at the front, and pretty much all of those things have been taken away from him. And yet he still had the courage to reach for it. But also, when I was on Reddit, what was really interesting was someone put the specific species of butterfly through the Google's bug finder, and the Google's bug finder said that it was an imperial white butterfly, or it could have been. It was a black and white movie, so it's kind of hard to tell without seeing the colors, but based off of the patterns, that's what Google says. So that species in particular represents purity, transformation, peace, and a connection with the divine. In a way, this could also represent Paul's purity with how he simply wanted to touch something beautiful in a land turned ugly by men. This could also represent how he will be at peace when he meets his end. There's just a lot of layers with the butterfly. And what came to my mind in the moment when he was reaching for the butterfly was the purity aspect of him wanting to touch something beautiful in a land that has been ruined by war. But, you know, like the other meanings that I said, that could have been on someone else's mind, especially if they're really knowledgeable about like butterflies and such. This is a very ensemble heavy movie, and I think every single actor did an amazing job. Not just the actor, but the writer did an amazing job at giving each character distinctions, whether a trait or actions that they did or actions done to them. It stuck with you, and you were really able to see everyone as an individual who had their own story. So for the directing element, I gave it a 5. I thought that the director did a great job at highlighting the hospital scene where Paul almost lost his life. They set it up pretty well where you really did think he was gonna die, because there was a long-term soldier in the hospital, and he witnessed everyone who passed away leave the room and never come back. And he said in particular the nurses will take that person's clothes as they take them out the room, and that was a sign that they would pass. And so when Paul got really sick and they were taking him out the room and they took his clothes, Paul saw that made him just more determined to make it and live. But you really did think that it was his end at that point, because pretty much everyone had died. There's a term for this type of cinematic device. Film people, help me out here. I can't remember the term. It's when you plant a piece of information or a symbol for the audience to later realize how important it is. What is that called? Plant and... For the visual element, I gave it a 5. The visual that really stuck with me were the boots. Kimrick, the boy who was shot in the leg once he got hysterical after leaving the underground bunker, he had a pair of really nice boots. And so the boys, after the attack was over and they were fed properly, they went to go visit Kimrick at the hospital, and his boots were, sitting under his bed. And at that point, the hospital had already amputated his leg and he was set to be discharged. And so the boys were like, one in particular was like, "Oh, those are some really nice boots. Can I have them? You don't need them anymore. You're going home." Paul ended up shooing them away because that comment was just crazy and just making Kimrick feel more anxious. So when Paul returned, his health started going down and he passed away. Paul ended up taking the boots and giving them to the boy who wanted them. The boy was ecstatic. He didn't care what that could have meant. At that point, they were also desensitized to their friends dying, so he was just happy to have boots that didn't give him blisters. What they did was they framed the boots, had a shot where they showed the boots while the boy was walking. They panned it up to the boy being happy and marching happily in his boots, and then the next shot would be of the boots on the boy, but the boy is dead. And then the next shot was we see these same boots again, but on another boy. He's marching happily to the front, and then we see him in the trenches shooting, and then he's shot and he falls on his back with the boots above his head, and the shot zooms in on the boots. It was an interesting way to capture how the boys or the soldiers who wear those boots will most likely keep on dying, and the boots would just forever be rotated. Sorry, talking about that had my heart heavy because the visual was just that strong. Piggybacking on that, the framing of war in this movie was in no way romanticized at all. The way they framed the scenes, specifically the battle scenes, was well done because you can feel the boys boys' terror in that moment with how foggy the view was of the enemies coming to attack them. So you couldn't see like the enemy's face, didn't know where they were, you didn't know how fast or how close they will come because it's just so foggy. I thought they did a really good portrayal of showing war as it is realistically without the whole romanticizing of it where they're like, charge, you know, that cliche stuff. For the editing element, I gave it a 5. Sorry, talking about this makes my heart heavy. Oh my god, so bad. The editing in particular that stuck with me the most was the overlay where it had the boys marching, like a clip of them from early in the movie. They were marching up a hill, and then it was overlaid over a picture of mass graves. Yeah, it was just very heavy to watch that final moment because yeah, all of them did pass away. Every single one in that shot. The sound element, I gave it a 4. The sound effects in particular were very revolutionary for the time. This was the very start of talkies. They were still trying to figure out how to even get crisp dialogue, but this movie not only figured out how to get good ish dialogue, like it was clear enough to understand, but they also had to worry about sound effects, such as like, what does a shell sound like falling? What does a gunshot sound like? How can we make sure that this is mixed well between moments of dialogue and war sound effects? They also did a wonderful job balancing the sound effects, the dialogue, but also the use of silence. Since this was like one of the first talkies pretty much of that era, the use of silence was so smart. It was intentional, and that was probably the first time silence was used as intentional. It would be used during moments of tension, during moments of waiting. It would just get you really anxious while watching. I really like how they did that. For the final rating, I technically rated it a 3.8, but let's give it 4 stars. Would I recommend this movie? Yes. I will say though, beware of the heaviness of the film. Even talking about this, my heart feels really heavy. And I would say just watch it when you're in a good mental headspace. Let's answer the question. Did All Quiet on the Western Front deserve the winner spot? Yes, hands down. I think maybe Love Parade, despite its problematic ending, came a little bit close, but I just feel like you can't even really compare the two because they're literally on opposite sides of the spectrum of genre. You have Love Parade where it's like romantic fantasy, and then you have All Quiet on the Western Front, realism and brutality. I also think that Big House could have earned that winner spot too. I would have probably picked Big House over Love Parade if I'm being honest, because the storyline was well done, the characters are very distinct, and also my man was in it, so got me lusting after a man that was born in the 1800s. I think that All Quiet on the Western Front won against all the other nominees because the story of Paul and the boys just left a super hollow feeling in your heart. The movie's just incredibly emotionally impactful. I think that the Academy thought that this was a very important film for people to watch in order to understand World War I better and the horrors that happened within it. It's easier to understand that through film and characters, much like how Wings did. But I think what was unique about All Quiet on the Western Front was it was showing the brutality of World War I through the eyes of children, but not only children, German children. So for this to win an American award, that says a lot because Germany and the US weren't allies during World War I. I think in a way this film sparked some empathy for the German children that were sent to war, tricked to war is a better way to say it. I think the movie does a good job at pushing the narrative that ultimately everyone involved in the war, enemy or not, lost something, and that the enemy or the antagonist of the story of All Quiet on the Western Front wasn't the French, it was the war itself. Or in other words, the protagonist of the film was not Paul, it was humanity, and the antagonist of the film was war. So yeah, guys, thank you so much for sticking around. I know this was a heavy one. Thank you guys so much for watching. Feel free to join the challenge and share your thoughts about the best picture winner and the nominees in the comments below. If I missed anything, please just let me know. I'm trying to condense these videos as much as I can for you guys. And let me know what you think about this new mic. It's not new. I found it. I probably got it years ago during my NYU era. Anyways, so next week we'll be watching Cimarron. I have not heard anything about this film. I know that one of you guys say it's really, really, really good. So I'm excited to watch. And we'll see you guys in the next one. That's a wrap. Until next time. Bye!